Hey everyone, and thanks for joining us for this special Human Longevity Project interview. My name is Joe Rignola, one of the producers of the Human Longevity Project, and joining me today is food mood expert Trudy Scott. Trudy is a certified nutritionist who educates anxious individuals about nutritional solutions for anxiety. She also has an amazing online event coming up called the Anxiety Summit. This is the 5th season of the summit, and this one focuses on the gut-brain axis. And I know if you're in our Human Longevity tribe, you already know how important this topic is. This conversation I have with Trudy is packed with practical solutions for stress and anxiety. There's some brand new research that Trudy talks about. I learned a ton. I think you're going to learn a ton. And look, if you enjoy this talk, and I mean, we packed a lot of stuff into this one 50-minute talk, imagine how awesome the whole summit's going to be. I'm excited to check it out. It starts November 11th. Go to newanxietysummit.com to save your seat. It's 100% free to watch. You'll even get a couple of early bird bonuses just for registering. Again, it's all free. Go to newanxietysummit.com or click the link below if you're watching this on our site, and I'll see you there. Now, enjoy my chat with Trudy Scott. Hey everybody, welcome to this very special Human Longevity Project interview. My name is Joe Rignola, and I'm here with Trudy Scott. Hey Trudy, how are you?
Hi, Joe. I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for doing this and for being here today. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to it.
Great. I am really excited about this. You're one of the people I haven't had a chance to interview yet and talk to yet. And this topic of anxiety is something I don't think is talked about enough. And you do a really great job with it. And you've actually got a summit coming up, your 5th season of the Anxiety Summit. So I'm excited about that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. I want to jump into we're going back and forth in email before doing this interview, and you mentioned something called psychobiotics. And I got really excited because I know my audience is going to love hearing about this. First of all, it sounds really cool. It sounds like something out of a sci-fi film.
I remember the first time I heard it a number of years ago and just thinking, oh, this sounds so cool. This is really interesting. I want to learn more. So you're right. It is a very intriguing word.
Mhm.
And the Professor Ted Dinan, he's a researcher out of Ireland, and him and his team work together on research related to the microbiome. And he actually coined this term in a paper called Psychobiotics, a novel class of psychotropic. And this was way back in 2013. So it's not a new term. We don't hear about it as much as I think we should, because as you say, it's intriguing.
Yeah.
And it just makes you think, oh, this is interesting. But the way they define it in this paper, and let me just read here for you so I can get it exactly right. We
Okay.
define a psychobiotic as a live organism that, when ingested in adequate amounts, produces a health benefit in patients suffering from psychiatric illness. And these bacteria are capable of producing and delivering neurotransmitter substances such as GABA and serotonin, which act on the gut-brain axis. Now, this was 2013, and him and his team in Ireland have continued to produce papers. I actually just went to PubMed just last night before our interview to see how many they've done, and they're at over 400 papers now. And I've actually had the wonderful opportunity of interviewing Dr. Dinan on one of my prior summits, and then John Cryan, who's also one of the co-authors of many of these papers and works on his team, was at the ISNPR conference in 2017 in Washington, D.C. And ISNPR is a great organization that your community might be interested in learning more about. It's called the International Society of Nutritional Psychiatry Research. So they are leading the way in nutritional psychiatry, which is basically changing our nutrients, changing our diet, changing our microbiome in order to impact and improve anxiety symptoms, depression, and anything in the sort of psychiatric realm. So it's really, really exciting research. And it's one of the reasons why I'm doing the summit. And the theme of the summit this year is the gut-brain axis. And we talk all about the gut and how we can impact the gut, not only the microbiome, but our digestive status, getting rid of parasites, getting rid of viruses, and anything that can impact our gut. And then we've got this two-way connection between the gut and the brain. And when we fix the gut, we can have a huge impact on our brain and our mental health. It's pretty exciting research.
We've all heard the quote that all disease begins in the gut, and certainly brain disorders are no different. It sounds revolutionary to talk about food and mental health, but it's not. It shouldn't be revolutionary. This is coming back to more traditional healing and using food as medicine.
It really is. And the great thing is that there is so much research on this area. And you know, working in this field and doing what I do and working with clients for the last 12 years, and you're probably seeing this too, is that we see the impact. What's exciting, I think, is that the research is almost catching up with what we see clinically. And I think that's good because it gives it validity for those who are non-believers, because there are some people who haven't experienced this, and you've got to just experience it to believe it. But for some people who may not have anxiety or have a mental health issue and they haven't experienced it, this research I think gives it a lot of validity, and that's why I'm just so excited about it. And I'm kind of geeky. I like to look at the research. I like to keep up to date with the research and share it, because when I was preparing for my summit, I always ask my community, what do they like and what are they looking for? Do they want to just be told, what they need to do, or do they want to know why they're doing it? And they all said, no, we want to know why. We want to understand it. We want to understand what's going on in our gut. We want to understand what the mechanisms are, what the biochemistry is. So I think it's really exciting that we've got this research, but also that people are interested in it, that they don't want to just be told, we're tired of being told what to do. We want to know what it's doing. We want to be empowered. We want the info.
It's exciting times, and I always brag that we have really one of the smartest audiences out there. They really do love this information, and they love to learn more. And it's encouraging, honestly, to get that feedback from people, and it makes it more fun to talk about.
It certainly does. Yeah. If you kind of like me, I think you like to dive into the research and get geeky as well. And your audience does. So I'm glad. And I think that's the way we should be. We should be questioning. We should be debating. I have professional differences of opinion with some leaders in the field, and that's okay.
Sure.
I actually interviewed Dr. Datis Karazian on the summit, and we have a professional difference of opinion when it comes to using GABA, which is an amino acid that can impact our GABA levels and make us, calmer. And I use GABA as a supplement, and he's always been of the opinion that it's not going to work. And we had a little discussion about it in our interview, which was really great. We agreed that we have, had these differences of opinion, and I think it's good because it moves the field forward. The fact that he always said it's not going to work because it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier made me dive more into the research and made me question more. And now I posed the question to him, and he's now thinking, well, maybe there's some other mechanisms on how it's working. So I think it's good. I think it's good that we question and we push each other, and we want to know.
It's fascinating, and I think it does push the conversation forward, and I think it encourages everyone listening to dig into the research and try it for themselves. I mean, it's GABA. There's certainly no real downside, I would imagine, to trying it, and it's it's either going to work for you or it's not, and where's the downside of trying it? So I think it's exciting to dig into that.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. Where's the downside? Because there is no downside, not like there are with, like benzodiazepines, which are so commonly prescribed for anxiety and have so much when it comes to downsides, the tolerance factor where you need more and more, and then the fact that it can actually start to cause problems. And, some people are prescribed a benzodiazepine because they've had a tooth extraction, and then they end up starting to get anxiety and they start to get insomnia. So we've got this whole issue with the benzos, the fact that they're so hard to taper off, and the fact that a lot in the medical profession don't even realize how difficult they are to taper, and people are on them for years and years and years. And now we've got all this research showing this connection between long-term benzodiazepine use and an increase in dementia. So, if we can find these nutritional solutions and use addressing the gut and the microbiome and these psychobiotics, it's just so exciting. It really is. And I wanted to just mention another paper because whenever I do an interview, I just go and look at some of the latest research. And the same authors, John Cryan and Ted Dinan have one of their latest papers that just came out in September this year. It's called The Gut Microbiome and Mental Health. What should we tell our patients? So this is the initial research was done in 2013. Obviously, it was with mostly animal studies, and they've started to do more human studies. I do want to just say that as exciting as this is, not all the animal studies translated exactly as they would have expected in the human studies. So this is still a growing area. We've still got a lot to learn. But the fact that, articles, papers like this are coming out saying, where are we in this? What should we tell our patients is good, because what they're saying is that the gut microbiome as a potential therapeutic target for mental illness is a hot topic in psychiatry. So this is good. This is good. Great. That it's in, and it's at a Canadian Journal of Psychiatry, that this is what we're talking about, and that it can play a role. And they're talking in this paper, they talk about depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, autism spectrum disorder, and of course we know anxiety as well. So it's exciting that it's becoming, there's this awareness, and we do have a long way to go, but there's certainly a lot of impact that we can have in the meantime.
It's really good that the research is catching up to things that we've been talking about for decades.
Yes, I know.
So I want to talk, and you talked about weaning off the antidepressants. I can attest to that. I was on Paxil 12 years ago and tried to wean off. Doctor said, I'll just take half a dose for 2 weeks and you'll be fine. I wasn't fine. It took me about 9 months to actually wean off slowly enough so I didn't get the brain zaps I'm sure you've heard about. And it was pretty scary stuff. So yeah, it's amazing to me that people they want all the research when you talk about GABA or a supplement, but they blindly follow doctor's advice, and it's really fascinating.
I'm sorry you went through that.
Yeah, and then look, maybe there's a time and a place for prescription medication, but so I don't want to sort of paint them all with the same brush. Maybe it helps some people, but we're here to talk about gut-brain axis and some potentially better solutions. I want to talk a little bit deeper about the psychobiotics. So we're talking about the relationship between psychobiotics and the gut microbiome. So, I mean, I could just go to the pharmacy and buy some probiotics off the shelf and take a bunch of them. I should be fine, right?
Well, no, we definitely want quality, professional grade. There is some research that show that certain strains have impacts on different neurotransmitter levels, and there's of course there's these spore-based probiotics that seem to be very helpful as well. So we're not 100% sure which ones are having an impact. Certainly things like adding in fermented foods are going to help as well, so there's a lot that we can do, but there is some research that is pretty exciting showing how specific strains can impact certain levels of our brain chemicals, and one of them is Lactobacillus bifidus. And that has been shown to increase GABA levels. There's also a number of papers where they talk about Lactobacillus rhamnosus, and in those papers, they found that it had an impact on GABA receptors, and it also lowered cortisol levels, which is pretty exciting. So it's having not just impacts on our neurotransmitters, but also other hormones as well. And then Saccharomyces and Bacillus raises norepinephrine. And this is, one of this helps us, give us some energy. And then there's Enterococcus and Streptococcus, and these can increase serotonin. And then Bacillus can also increase dopamine. And I want to just give credit to Dr. Peter Bongiorno. He's one of my great experts on the Anxiety Summit, this season 5 that's coming up. And he shared all of this with me. So I just want to give credit to him for grabbing the research on these. So yeah, it's exciting. I wouldn't say that we should, go out and look for these specific strains yet. I think it's early days,
Okay.
but having a combination is exciting. And he certainly said that when he uses specific strains, he's not just doing it in isolation. You don't want to just do this and nothing else. You want to be working on the gut. You want to be working on digestion. You want to make sure that the person doesn't have parasites, work on that. And then, of course, use other nutritional support. And I'm a big fan of using GABA as an amino acid, as I said, using serotonin support. So I use tryptophan. So doing all of these in conjunction with the strains of these probiotics are, is starting to have an impact. And he actually shared one paper, which I thought was very powerful. And this was a group of patients with bipolar disorder. And the only intervention, now I said we should be doing everything, but in this study, the only intervention was probiotics. And it reduced the number of hospital stays dramatically in bipolar disorder, which is pretty powerful because we think of bipolar disorder as something that, there's the only thing we can do is medications. You alluded to that a little bit ago, that, there is a place for medications, and it's, you think of bipolar as being so serious that we definitely need these medications. And yet probiotics had such a huge impact. So when we hear that with something that severe, I think it just gives us a lot of encouragement for all of the other conditions, whether you have a diagnosed anxiety disorder, whether you just have anxiety and feel stressed, it doesn't really matter. And the unfortunate thing is, Joe, is that the stats that we have for anxiety is really not as good as it should be, because a lot of people are not diagnosed. So it's a lot higher than we realize. And I just think it's really exciting to think that we can have such a big impact.
Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe we can talk on that a little bit. Almost everyone you talk to is like, oh, I have anxiety or I'm stressed out. Is there a difference between someone that is, stressed out, anxious, whether it's an acute case, and someone who's clinically anxious?
I don't actually look at the diagnosis when I'm working with someone. Well, I look at the diagnosis and I empathize with whatever's going on. But what I do is I look at their symptoms. And, someone may have a diagnosis and be, being diagnosed with a panic disorder, or they may be diagnosed with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, or they just may be diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. In all of those instances, you may have different types of anxiety that are driven by different biochemical causes. And one of them could be low GABA, for example. And if you've got low GABA, you may have one of those diagnoses, but you may have this physical tension where you carry your anxiety in your shoulders and in your neck and in your head, and you feel this sort of feeling, this feeling of sort of fear in the pit of your stomach, like a physical kind of anxiety. That tells me that maybe low GABA is one of the root causes. Other clues that might tell me that low GABA is a root cause is if you crave carbs in order to relax, or you use alcohol to relax. A lot of people with low GABA anxiety will drink to relax. If they're going out socializing, they'll drink alcohol in order to fit in order to relax, or they come home at the end of the day and they've got to have a few glasses of wine that may go into a bottle of wine just to chill out at the end of the day. If someone resonates with that, then I say, well, we should really look at low GABA. And then if someone's got any one of those diagnoses that I mentioned, but they've got this ruminating thoughts and the second guessing, and who am I to be doing this? They may be, if they're high powered, they may sort of feel this feeling of like, I'm an imposter, that we've heard this term imposter syndrome. Someone's going to catch out that I'm not as good as I really am. And they're going to find out that I don't really know what I'm doing. They've also got with women, it's PMS, perimenopausal symptoms, the irritability, often anger. That's low serotonin. And so we can have the low GABA anxiety, we can have the low serotonin anxiety, and these can happen in someone who's been diagnosed with in any of those that I mentioned earlier. So we really want to look at the symptoms and then address those symptoms. And then, of course, the gut as well. If someone has any of those symptoms, we've also got to look at the gut, because if you've got, for example, gluten sensitivity, which is another root cause of anxiety, and there's a ton of research on gluten and anxiety and bipolar disorder and schizophrenia even, what the gluten's doing, as you and your community know, it's damaging the gut, it's affecting nutrient absorption, and we know with gluten issues that we have low serotonin. So that's the driving factor that is causing the low serotonin. So at the same time as we want to support serotonin with some of these probiotics and these psychobiotics and using an amino acid like tryptophan, we want to go downstream and look at the root cause. Is it gluten that's causing the issue? Is that causing leaky gut? How do we heal the gut? Is the fact that they've got parasites because they've got low hydrochloric acid one of the root causes? So we've always got to go back upstream, but using the amino acids up front is very powerful for starting to impact those changes. So hopefully I answered that question. Some people may have an actual diagnosis, someone else may just feel stressed, and overwhelmed about everything. And I got into this because of my own anxiety and my own panic attacks in my late 30s. And so I know what it's like to push, and we just feel like we're invincible and we go. And we don't want to wait until we get to the point where we're going to have a panic attack. And I did that. I was actually working in corporate America. I was working really long hours. I was totally stressed out. I was going through perimenopause. Cortisol was through the roof. I discovered I had gluten issues. I had heavy metals. My gut was messed up. The whole, I call it my perfect storm. And I pushed. And then I had the panic attack. And then I had another one. I didn't know what it was. And so I think the message is don't wait until it gets so bad. If you're feeling like you are self-medicating with carbs or with alcohol or whatever your drug of choice is, I'm seeing a lot of people starting in their sort of late 30s, late 40s, early 50s starting to run marathons, which I think is great to be exercising. But for some people, it's a way to self-medicate. It's just too much. It's not good. So we can self-medicate, and I use the word self-medicate in many ways. Coffee is another one that a lot of people use and don't really want to hear about. Often coffee, no, don't tell me I need to give up my coffee. So, and then coffee is a big thing with anxiety. If you've got anxiety symptoms and you're feeling stressed and you're feeling agitated and you're not sleeping well, you really got to be questioning the coffee thing as well. So it's not just the gut, it's not just the psychobiotics, it's not just the amino acids, it's the whole picture.
Yeah, context is important. I notice when there are times when I am more stressed or more anxious about whatever, that I'm much more sensitive to caffeine. And it actually makes it worse. But really interesting. I talked to a lot of entrepreneurs too, and that imposter syndrome is real. A lot of people feel that. So it's really interesting that's low serotonin, and that the low GABA is more related to trying to self-medicate with sugar or alcohol or what have you. Really interesting. Really good.
Yeah, it really is. And with the low serotonin imposter syndrome type of symptoms, tryptophan is amazing. So I will use tryptophan as a supplement, or you can use 5-HTP. 5-HTP can make some people feel a little bit more wired, and it's often the first choice for practitioners to recommend. There's some concern about tryptophan in some circles. We do address that on the summit as well, because there's concern for some people that it's going to go down the wrong pathway. It's going to go down and create quinolinic acid, which is neurotoxic. But I have found that using vitamin B6 with tryptophan prevents this, and I haven't had any issues with it. That being said, there are some people who do better with one versus the other. So it's a matter of doing a trial. I will, have clients do a questionnaire, rate their symptoms on a scale of 1 to 10. So if with low serotonin, obviously it would be the imposter syndrome, the negative self-talk, the worry in the head, the afternoon and evening cravings. With low serotonin, the cravings are in the afternoon and the evening. So you're wanting carbs in the afternoon and evening. And then do a trial of one of the amino acids. And with tryptophan, the starting dose is 500 milligrams. With 5-HTP, it's 50. And just do a trial and see how you feel. And the amazing thing, Joe, is the amino acids work within 5 minutes. So look at your symptoms, decide what the scale is on a scale of 1 to 10. do a trial, take one of them, open it into your mouth. You don't want to swallow it. If you open it, the capsule, open it into your mouth, just, the powder, and hold it in your mouth for 2 or 3 minutes. And within 2 or 3 minutes, up to 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, you should be able to say, wow, my symptoms went from a 9 out of 10 in terms of severity down to maybe a 7 out of 10, maybe a 5 out of 10. That'll tell you right away that, yes, you need serotonin support or GABA support, whichever one you're actually trialing. And then you can decide how much you need. Now, I said the starting dose is 500 milligrams, but for some people, if they're very, very sensitive, I call them my pixie dust clients, they will start really low. And you can actually just open up a capsule, just do a little dab and put a dab on your tongue and see if that can have an effect. And it's amazing because it's so empowering, because you can feel the results, and it gives people hope, because although we're talking about getting off gluten and gut health and diet, those can take a little while to address and to get to the root cause of. And I will use the amino acids on day one when I'm working with someone, because it gives them results for a start, and it's giving them hope. But the third reason is it enables them to make those changes that they need to make. Because you're overwhelmed, you're stressed, you can't get things done, you've got this negative self-talk, you maybe have this imposter syndrome that you talked about, so you've got that going on in the back of your head while you're doing these presentations or you're in these meetings. And now you're being told, okay, gluten might not be such a good idea, or maybe you should start fasting, or maybe you should, get off dairy, or get off the carbs, and, you're doing a paleo diet, but you are eating a lot of sort of treats, that the healthy treats, and you shouldn't be eating so many of those. And that just feels like too much.
Caveman cupcakes. They had cupcakes, right?
Exactly. Yeah, adult candy. So, but the amino acids make it easy to do that, because as well as the mood aspect, there's the whole cravings aspect with each of them. So it helps with the mood, but it helps with breaking that addiction from the sugar and the carbs and the gluten and the caffeine and everything else. So it just helps at so many levels. They really are pretty amazing.
And it's motivation. Once you see results like that, it's motivation to keep going, and then maybe make those lifestyle changes that are so important.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. You're just getting a little bit of help, and you think, okay, this is good, I can keep going, which is so important.
So do you recommend starting with tryptophan and seeing if that works for you? And if maybe you're not getting the results, to try 5-HTP? Or
that's what I do, and it's just what I've done and what I've had good results with. And the reason being is that, because of the fact that 5-HTP can raise cortisol, there's 2 papers that show that 5-HTP can raise cortisol. And certainly until I've seen what someone's cortisol levels are, I always like to start with tryptophan. I do know there's some practitioners who start with 5-HTP and swear by 5-HTP. And I think it's just a matter of personal preference and what I've seen work clinically. And the important thing is quality is key with tryptophan. As you know, it was pulled off the market a number of years ago. There were some GMO theories that it was, a genetically modified formulation that came out of Japan, and that caused some issues. So can I mention a product name here? Please, is that all right? Yeah, Lidtke is the company that I use, LIDTKE. I'm not associated with them in any way. I don't get any commission for saying this, but I just love their product. It's just a good quality, clean product, and it works well. And I've had a number of clients come to me individually or in some of my group programs, and they've been on other brands of tryptophan, and they've got some of the results that I've talked about. And then when they've switched over to Lidtke, the improvements are pretty profound. So I've seen that the quality is superior to some of the other products out there. I'm sure there's some other good ones. Sure. I just haven't had an opportunity to try some of the others. So yes, to answer your question, I start with tryptophan. And if that doesn't work, then we definitely want to do a trial of 5-HTP. And it's so interesting because these neurotransmitters, these amino acids, as well as helping the mood, have a direct impact on the gut as well. And one of the papers that I share in one of my interviews on the summit is 5-HTP and the effects on motility. So we know if someone's got SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, they may have motility issues. And this was a paper published this year, 2019, and I'll give you the name of the paper, The Effects of Serotonin and Slow Release 5-HTP on Gastrointestinal Motility in a Mouse Model of Depression. So this is interesting. This was slow release 5-HTP, which I don't have any experience using. And the authors say they feel that the fact that it's slow release, it's going to have better results.
Mm-hmm.
I personally have seen regular 5-HTP have an impact, and I've also seen tryptophan have an impact on motility with clients. But it's interesting, again, that we're getting some research supporting what we're seeing in humans. This was actually a mouse model of depression, but they actually say in the paper that 5-HTP may be used to treat patients with intestinal dysfunction associated with low levels of serotonin. Wow. So it's interesting. You'll hear a lot of people say this chemical theory of depression and this chemical theory of anxiety has been debunked, and there's no longer issues with low serotonin, and yet it works, and we're seeing current new research supporting it. I think the whole thing about the chemical theory being debunked is because it was tied to medications, because all the pharmaceutical industry papers were talking about low serotonin, therefore take this SSRI. So that part I don't support, because we've got other ways that we can support serotonin, but we definitely have this connection between these neurotransmitters and gut issues and mood issues. This paper was actually talking about depression. And I actually reached out to the author. Whenever any of these papers come out, I like to have a little conversation with the authors. I'll thank them for their research, and they love that because they say, oh, good, I'm glad that people are actually using it. And then I'll ask them questions. And I said to her, I do this, and I always tell them I'm doing this clinically and I'm seeing these results if you want any feedback. And a lot of them are very interested to hear that, yes, this is actually happening with humans. Which I think is great, because I like to think that I'm helping to drive some future research, because if they're hearing that there are practitioners using these amino acids and that they are getting results, they're thinking, oh, maybe we could do something a little bit differently. And she said to me, they hadn't even thought of using regular 5-HTP. They just thought the slow release would be more effective. So it's good. I think it's good to firstly be appreciating the researchers. As we said earlier on, the research is so important, but also to be thanking them and then having these conversations with them, because the more research we have, I think, as we said earlier, better things are going to be.
Evidently, your school of thought is that slow release may not be as effective as, you suggest opening the actual capsule and sprinkling it in your mouth. So in your experience, is that a better delivery method? Is a faster delivery method better?
So I like to use the opening the capsules or using a powder for doing the trial, because that way you're getting feedback right away. And but that being said, it's a good question you asked there, Joe, because for some people who've got compromised digestive system and they've got gut issues, doing it like that is more effective to continue in the long run. So typically I'll say, do it this way for doing the trial, then you get the feedback. And then over the course of the next week, I'm having them monitor their symptoms, because what we want to do is start low, see what kind of results we get. Maybe we get 2 notches of improvement. Over the course of the next week, they'll come back and they'll say, yes, it's holding. I'm still feeling great in terms of my mental anxiety. I'm not worrying so much. I'm not sort of ruminating so much. My sleep's better. I didn't mention insomnia. That's a big one with both low serotonin and low GABA. I'm sleeping a little bit better, and so it's definitely helping. So then I'll say, okay, now we need to increase it. So maybe you started on 500 milligrams of tryptophan. Now we want to increase it to 2 of the 500 milligrams. And tryptophan is dosed mid-afternoon and evening. Mid-afternoon and evening, because that's when serotonin starts to take a dip. So we want to catch it as it's going down, because it's then used to make melatonin. So where was I going with this? So starting with it opened on the mouth, in the mouth, seeing how you feel, increasing over the next week, yes, it's improving, increase again over the next week, get to the point where we're not getting any added benefits, then we go back to that previous dose. At that time, then I would then consider adding another amino acid. It's good to do one at a time, because then you're going to know what's actually doing what and what's helping. And then, so your question was about 5-HTP on the tongue, or the slow release. The slow release 5-HTP hasn't been around long enough for me to know, is it better? And I think because of biochemical individuality, maybe it's going to work better for some people.
Right.
Maybe putting it on the tongue is going to be better. Maybe swallowing it for other people is going to work better. And maybe doing a slow release is better as well. My concern with the slow release is some of the additives that are put in there to make them slow release. They'll often put some cellulose compounds in there that can be irritating to some people in terms of digestive issues. So I think it's very, very individualized. But I'll have some people, do the trial of the amino acids by opening them and then going straight to swallowing it, and they do absolutely fine. And then others need to continue to open it. Unfortunately, the tryptophan does not taste very pleasant. So it's a very bitter taste versus GABA, which is not a bad taste when you open it onto the tongue. For making it more palatable, you can mix it with a little bit of mashed up banana. You can also, I've been experimenting a little bit, and there's a very nice way to you put a little bit of tryptophan powder on a spoon, mix it with a little bit of coconut oil and a little dash of vanilla, and it's quite delectable.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're so not used to eating bitter foods anymore. We actually evolved eating bitter foods, but that's another conversation.
That's a good point. A lot of people are looking for something sweet. So I personally don't find the taste bad, and I've been dealing with some resurgence of health issues. I've actually a year ago discovered I have Lyme disease. So I've been dealing with that, and have had to get back on the amino acids to support my neurotransmitters, which got messed up again with the Lyme disease. And so I've been using tryptophan and GABA again, and I don't mind the taste. I've got used to it. So good point about the always wanting something sweet.
A similar question about the GABA. Is there a specific type of GABA or a specific brand that you find works better than others?
I always like to say use an individual amino acid, because that way you can increase and you can decrease as needed. So with tryptophan, it's just tryptophan on its own. Let me just, before I answer your GABA question, there is another Lidkey product called Tryptophan Complete.
Okay.
That one does have B6 in it. It has folate, methylfolate. It has a few other nutrients, cofactors that help to make serotonin. I like that one too, and a number of people like it because it's giving you all those cofactors. I mentioned how important B6 is for tryptophan. But again, with that one, with doing the trial, I like to do the trial with just the tryptophan on its own, and then possibly add in the tryptophan complete, because that way you've got the sort of baseline, and then you can go up or down as needed. Because keep in mind, our need for serotonin support and GABA support can change. I just mentioned mine has changed again now that I've got Lyme disease. People who are prone to the winter blues will find their serotonin takes a dip in the winter, and they may need to up their serotonin support in the winter time. If you're under a lot of stress, this can happen as well. But to go back to your question about GABA, GABA Calm is a product by Source Naturals. It's an over-the-counter product. And this one diverts a little bit from my saying using an individual product, because this has GABA primarily, but it's a really low dose, 125 milligrams. It has a little bit of glycine, and it has a little bit of taurine. And then it also has a tiny bit of tyrosine, which helps counteract the effects of the GABA, because GABA taken during the day can be a little bit too relaxing for some people. So it's a nice combination, and it's a low dose. It's 125 milligrams. So a lot of people hear about GABA and go and buy 500 milligrams or 750 milligrams, take it, and they'll say, oh my gosh, I just feel totally wiped out. Or they'll get like a flush, like a niacin type flush, or they'll feel dizzy or lightheaded. And it's because it's just too much. So we want to start low with GABA. The Source Naturals GABA Calm is really nice because it's a sublingual. So
Okay.
you're getting it sublingually, and GABA is one that I will say I like to have my clients do sublingually all the time.
Sure.
So this is nice. The problem is if you find you need higher doses, you don't want to be sucking on 6 GABA calms, because that, it's a lot well, the problem with the GABA calm, as nice as it is, it does have sugar alcohols in it. So some people have issues with sugar alcohols.
Mhm.
It does also have orange flavor in it. So it's not 100%, but it does the job. So it's really great.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in just whatever gets people to follow the advice and see the results, and then you can keep playing with that and keep getting. I always say, don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. So
yeah, give that a try. See if
Yeah.
you get results. And then the other one that I like is it's a product called Bionutritional Fundamentals, and it's called GABA TSAP. T-SAP, and it's a small amount of GABA and a little bit of theanine. And that GABA theanine seems to be really nice, because the theanine, as well as being calming, gives you a little bit of mental clarity and mental focus. And this opened up into the tongue is just very pleasant to taste. It's
Great.
pleasant tasting, and it's nice. So once you graduate from, maybe you take GABA calm in the day, and then you use the GABA TSAP at night, because then you may want a higher dose in order to sleep. Now, even though the GABA calm's got tyrosine in it, some people find it's helpful at night as well. So again, it's very individualized. And as you say, you can play a little bit with it.
Yeah, excellent. Another popular supplement that seems to be all the rage is collagen. What are some potential issues with collagen?
Yes, I think collagen's amazing, and it's all the rage, as you say, and a lot of people are using it to help with skin health and nails and hair, and it's great for all of those applications. The problem is there are a subset of people who are susceptible to low serotonin, and collagen is a combination of certain amino acids, which is actually devoid of tryptophan. So it does not contain tryptophan. And I remember when collagen first became the big rage, I thought, I remember some of these studies being done looking at tryptophan depletion. And this was way back when they were looking at SSRIs. And they would give these study participants a combination of amino acids that did not contain tryptophan in order to lower their serotonin levels. And then they would give them medications. And then more recently, they've been doing similar studies, and they're called tryptophan depletion studies, or acute tryptophan depletion, ATD, acute tryptophan depletion. And they are now using gelatin in these studies.
Mm-hmm.
So both collagen and gelatin do not contain tryptophan. And when you consume them in large amounts, it can lower your serotonin.
Wow.
And there are a number of people who find that when they start consuming collagen or gelatin, whether it's in large amounts or whether it's 1 or 2 teaspoons a day, they start to find that their anxiety starts to go through the roof again. They can't sleep and they feel depressed. Now, I discovered this because I had a fall, injured my back, and I thought, well, let me try some collagen and let's do a little experiment here. And I had some collagen, and within 2 days, I was feeling this anxiety that I'd felt in my late 30s, a sort of waking in the early hours with this sort of fear, imagining the worst, this sort of feeling of doom. And I thought, this is, I haven't felt this for a long time. Where's this coming from? And then I started digging and looking in research, and I posted a question on Facebook in my community, and my community is amazing. As you know, our communities are just so fantastic for helping us work through these things. And I said, has anyone else noticed this? And I had all of these people saying, oh my gosh, I took collagen and this is what happened. So then I started to look into the research, and we now, I've sort of identified, people who may be susceptible. If you've have been on SSRIs in the past, if you are prone to low serotonin, if you have possibly are you currently on an SSRI, if you, especially more of an issue with women, if you have history of anxiety and depression in the family. There's also some research showing that people who have used drugs, street drugs in their youth, possibly, or currently using, drugs to self-medicate. The one paper looked at ecstasy and found that ecstasy users, people using a lot of alcohol to self-medicate, are just more prone to the effects of collagen and gelatin lowering their serotonin and making them more anxious. Now, I'm not saying don't use collagen. I'm saying figure out if you fall into this category, and if you do, using tryptophan in conjunction with collagen often solves the problem. And interestingly enough, when I posed the question, I had 3 categories of feedback. One was saying, no, I'm absolutely fine. Some of those people were currently using tryptophan or 5-HTP, some weren't. So it's very individualized. Then there was another subset who said no, who said, yes, it definitely does impact me. When I take tryptophan, it helps. A lot of people were so affected by it, they just didn't even want to do it ever again. And I said, no, it's got so many benefits. It heals the gut. I mean, that's another huge benefit, is the gut healing benefits. They just didn't even want to try it with tryptophan support. And then there's another group, which I thought was very interesting. They are using it to actually lower serotonin. They feel that they have serotonin levels that are too high.
Wow.
And they are using it to lower their serotonin levels. And it really is fascinating. And, with all of these neurotransmitter levels, too much and too little can cause similar results. We know that if you, say, for example, you think you've got low serotonin and you're going to, you say, my anxiety, is so severe, I definitely need serotonin support, and it's so bad, I'm not going to start with 500 milligrams, I'm going to start with 3,000 milligrams because it's so bad. More is not better, and too much can cause an opposite effect. If you don't need
the receptors are down-regulating, is that what's
well happening? It's just too much. It just sends you want that equilibrium. So I think with just using one dose, I don't know that it's going to affect the receptors, but that's a good question. I need to think about that. But it's just too much. It just sends you over, off out of the balance. You want that balance. So if you try tryptophan, firstly, if it's too much, it can cause problems. If you don't need it, it can cause problems. I had one of my colleagues say, well, I want to just try tryptophan, but she didn't have any of the low serotonin symptoms, and she felt sad when she used it. So if you don't need it, it's not going to work, or if you take too much. So it's very interesting that a few of these people were saying they felt they had high serotonin and it was lowering their serotonin. So it's interesting. I've reached out to a number of people sharing this, and some people say, it's impossible, it couldn't be happening, but there are there's enough research supporting it. I've had enough feedback. I've got a blog post on it. I think I've got 400 comments on it right now from people who are finding that it's an issue. So I think it's something we need to be aware of and do something about. And the other thing is, Joe, is some collagen companies are adding tryptophan into their collagen. So that's telling me that they're aware of it, but not everyone needs it because of the three different groups that I told you about here. So I think that's great. If you're someone who does need that extra tryptophan, I like that it's in that collagen that you might be using, but maybe you don't need it. So I think, again, I would like to see it individualized based on each person's unique needs.
That makes a lot of sense. Trudy, I want to talk a bit about your summit that's coming up. You've gotten, quite a lineup here. Our friend Karan is in it, Karan Krishnan, and Dr. Karazian that you spoke about, Alison Seebecker, Summer Bach, Tom O'Brien, Donna Gates, legends in the space of gut health and as well as brain health. Another guest you have is Dr. Perlmutter. And you teased this in the email, so I'm excited to hear this. You said Dr. Perlmutter has some possible new mechanisms that may lead to anxiety. You want to talk about that?
Yes, certainly. And it was such a pleasure to interview all these amazing legends, as you say. That was just, I just love doing these. I get to spend hours and hours deciding what we're going to talk about and what research we're going to talk about, looking for the latest research and asking these questions. And certainly with Dr. Perlmutter, it was an absolute thrill. I've never had the opportunity to interview him before. He's just such a hero of mine. And invariably in one of, in the interview, something comes up that is out of the blue, and I'm surprised, and I love it because I get to learn too. I learn so much when I do these interviews. And this mechanism that he talked about, we hadn't sort of planned to talk about it, and he brought it up when I asked the question. And it's very exciting to think that there's so much that we have to learn. And we hear about how inflammation is a factor when it comes to anxiety and depression, and we hear how it can actually make things worse. But he shared something that I wasn't familiar with, and afterwards I went and looked at some of the research, and it was pretty exciting. He was saying, I'm going to quote from him here. He talked about, what is anxiety? It's a physiological reaction to a real or perceived stress, in other words, a threat. So there may actually be a real threat, or maybe you just feel like there's a threat. And I mentioned how when I had my anxiety, I would just wake with this feeling of doom, like there's this threat, something's going to happen. And there wasn't ever a threat, but you just feel like there is this threat. So what he said is often there's no real threat, but the body perceives that there's this threatening situation coming. And then the body goes into this anxiety response for no good reason. What he said is we understand that inflammation and cortisol actually tend to reduce the availability or the functionality of a connection between two parts of the brain. And one of them is the amygdala, which is the fear center, and the other is the prefrontal cortex, which is an area of the brain that calms things down. So we've got this connection between the amygdala, which is making us feel anxious, and we've got the prefrontal cortex, which calms things down. And we've got this connection between the two. And he said that when we've got inflammation and high cortisol, this connection between these two parts just goes out the window. Wow. And they can't communicate. So the calming aspect of the prefrontal cortex on this fear center, the amygdala, it just can't work. So I thought that was really interesting. He actually called the amygdala the adult in the room. It's the one that's saying, calm down, everything's okay, you're going to be fine. So as well as the microbiome that's out of balance, the fact that our serotonin's low, the fact that our GABA's low, the fact that we've got gluten issues, everything else, vagus nerve issues, we've got this possible driving force on how inflammation is breaking down this connection. So it was very exciting, and there's a bunch of new studies around this, and I think it's exciting that we've got all of this understanding about what's going on. It still brings us back to eating real whole food, using nutritional psychiatry to address our deficiencies, getting rid of the toxins, improving the gut, improving digestion. But I think understanding some of these underlying mechanisms just help us think, okay, now I can understand why I felt like I felt. Now I can understand why I've got to get down the inflammation, why I've got to get on an anti-inflammatory diet.
I think it's great because it empowers people, it gives people hope. And I think that's why I'm so excited about your summit, because it is so much solutions-based. A lot of summits, it's just a lot of information, and what you focused on here is solutions. So I'm really excited about it. People can go to newanxietysummit.com to register to watch that for free. And tell me the dates again when that starts.
November the 11th to the 17th.
Excellent.
And if folks register now, they get access to Dr. Karazian's interview right away. When we talk about the brain, how we've talked about how important it is to focus on the gut, but he talks about instances where we need to focus on the brain to actually help the gut. So that was a really great interview. And then Andoise Gittelman, we talk about the importance of bile production and how important that is when it comes to anxiety and thyroid health and estrogen dominance. And then Dr. Carolyn Ladowski, who's an Australian naturopath, we talk all about MTHFR and the B12 polymorphisms and pyroluria and oxalates and all exciting topics. So those three are available as soon as people register. And I'm just really excited to share this. And I appreciate having the opportunity to come and talk to you, Joe, and share this with your community. Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate your time, and this is a lot of great. We packed a lot of stuff into about an an hour here, so I really appreciate it. I think people are going to walk away from just this interview with a lot of good information. So folks, if you thought this interview was great, imagine what the whole summit's going to be like. It's going to be really amazing. I'm excited. Trudy, thanks again.
Thank you.